Hello, my name is Tylluan Penry. I'm a solitary pagan witch, I'm an author, and I founded the Wolf and Howl Press. And tonight's little chat, you can see it's night time, light is a little bit different from our usual videos. Tonight's little chat is about the magical properties of the ivy. Now, when I've been doing these little talks, I've been deliberately picking what I would call the humble plants, the plants that everybody knows. I've never much cared for using plants that you have to go out and search for. You know, I don't want to go looking for Edelweiss up on an Alp because it doesn't grow near me. I mean, they might have some in a garden centre, but you know, they haven't got it growing wild. I want to introduce you to plants that are everywhere, things you can't miss. You will fall over them. You know, they're that common. Because I think they're often unfairly overlooked and they have a wonderful, amazing history. And the ivy is no exception. If you see me looking down or putting my glasses on, I do have some notes here today because some of it I might forget and I don't want to miss out on it. The ivy, first of all, what are its magical properties? Well, they're very easy to spot because the ivy is an evergreen. And things that are evergreen symbolise everlasting life. They symbolise tenacity. They are used at the winter solstice, greenery you bring indoors. Interestingly though, ivy is one of the herbs of St. John. Now, the herbs of St. John's Day is the 23rd of June, so that's 2 days after the summer solstice. And in fact, when they Christianized festivals, you will find they often had this 2-day gap. So you had St. John's Day replaced the summer solstice and took over and Christianized, if you like, a lot of the former pagan and heathen traditions. And you also find it on the, the Assumption on the 15th of August. Well, that replaced the 13th of August, which was a day sacred to Diana and Artemis. So this is something we notice. But what is interesting about the ivy is that it's very, very useful at the winter solstice, but it is one of the herbs of St. John that were used for celebrating originally 2 days earlier on the summer solstice. So that's one thing. I said it symbolised eternity, it symbolised everlasting life. Actually, on the early sarcophagi, early Christian sarcophagi, you often find there are carved ivy leaves. And this was something which the church actively tried to discourage, which obviously suggests to us that that was something that was pagan, that people would not leave behind. They felt that this symbolised eternity and therefore they wanted eternal life, they were promised eternal life, and therefore the ivy symbolised it. But the early church did not like it. In fact, the early church never really liked the ivy all that much at all. It wouldn't allow it into the church for a very long time because you know the way people decorate in churches, and that was something that was done right from quite early times. And ivy was not allowed in the church for a very long time, and even when it was, they basically tried to put it out of sight. I don't know what they did, hid it behind a column or a pillar or something, I've no idea, but that's what they say about it. Now, the thing about ivy is that it was traditionally associated with the divine feminine, with goddesses. Now, the reason I hesitate there is because I know some people venerate a goddess, the goddess, several goddesses. So we lump together, if you like, all those beliefs and we say the divine feminine. So whichever happens to be your path, well, you can adapt it accordingly. So ivy was associated with the divine feminine. Holly, on the other hand, was associated with masculine, the divine masculine. Although, this I've always found very interesting, ivy was sacred, believe it or not, to some of the thunder and lightning deities. People like, and I've written it down, I know one is Pecunus and the other one is Thor. Why that should be, I don't know. But worth bearing in mind. Another thing we know about ivy was that there was a sort of I was going to say an embargo, it's not quite the right word, but people certainly frowned upon the idea of bringing it indoors, especially around Yule. And in particular, they believed it was very, very unlucky to bring it indoors and have it anywhere near the hearth or the mantelpiece. Well, obviously a mantelpiece is a relative latecomer, you know. Originally it would be a central hearth, and then they would put the hearth at one end in the wall. So the idea of a mantelpiece is much, much later. But what I find very interesting is this idea that ivy was ever associated with the hearth or the mantelpiece. And what you have to bear in mind is the hearth in those days was very much where women did the cooking. And it was also where people sat in order to do whatever they had to do as the light faded. I mean, here tonight, I've got candles. I like candles. We thought they'd look pretty down here. But in those days, candles were extremely expensive, very, very much something that you didn't light unless you had to. You'd do it if you were going to impress people, or if you had something important to do. And this is where the saying, you know, the game is not worth the candle. In other words, if you were playing cards or something, well, it wasn't worth wasting a candle on it, because candles were expensive. So what I was saying then, before I went off a tangent, which I do, what I was saying was that it was frowned upon to bring ivy indoors, to put it near the hearth, near, later on, the mantelpiece, in the realm where women tended to work. And of course, as we've said, ivy was associated with the divine feminine. It suggests to me that women were discouraged from doing whatever it was they did when they brought ivy indoors. And it suggests to me again that this was some sort of domestic ritual. I don't know what it was. I wouldn't like to hazard a guess at the moment. You were very welcome to guess away and guess, and maybe you'll come up with the answer. But I think it's a case that people brought ivy indoors, they did some kind of ritual, and it was the women of the house that did it. And this is what they were trying very hard to get rid of. They were trying to, you see, it's very easy to dictate what people do in public. The real problem is what they do in private in their homes. And since you could not get a clergyman, a priest out into everybody's homes all the time to check on what they were doing, what you did was you put about this rumour, if you like, this theory that it was bad luck. And if people believed it enough, and you've only got to look what happens on the internet, how these rumours take off, and all of a sudden people are telling you them that stories as though they're fact. Well, it's exactly the same thing. These rumours were put about to say, this is unlucky. Did everybody listen to it? Well, I don't know. But I know my mother always brought ivy indoors at Yule time. She never said exactly why. She'd decorate the house with it. And in particular with her, she'd decorate the staircase. But I suspect it's a remnant of something that was passed down. Maybe not from ancient times, but it was passed down at some point. And one last thing before I go. Hope I'm not going on too much about the ivy, but I'm very passionate about it because it's a fascinating plant. The leaves of the ivy don't look unlike vine leaves. And in fact, it's very difficult to tell sometimes whether somebody's wearing a wreath of vine leaves around their head or a wreath of ivy leaves. It looks very similar. And of course, ivy does have these big berries as well. Now, actually, there's a reason for this link. And the idea was that whereas grapes made into wine got you drunk, ivy made you sober. Now, not in the sense that you go making wine out of ivy berries. Don't, right? That would not be a good idea. They are emetic. They would make you feel very ill indeed. But what people did was they made cups out of ivy wood. And if you've ever seen how thick ivy can grow, it's quite possible you could make a small cup out of it. And the idea was that if you got absolutely Mozart, UK listeners may well understand what I'm saying here. For listeners outside of the UK, Mozart means getting very, very drunk indeed. So if you got very, very drunk indeed, then you drank from a cup made of ivy wood, and that was supposed to sober you up. Isn't that a lovely thought? I've never tried it, but it's a lovely little legend. And on that note, I'm going to leave you. I hope you have fun with the ivy all through the year, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.